Genetically modified organisms have been around about 20 years. They were introduced into our food in the 1990s. They basically are able to be done because the Supreme Court decision in 1980 said that GMOs, well, that you could privately own living material. Before it hadn't been possible to patent life. Now companies can patent life, and so it's opened a big door for a lot of companies to move into genetic modification. The primary applications that have been developed are two. One is herbicide resistance, so that farmers can spray an herbicide over all the crops in their field, all the weeds and crops, and kill everything except what has been engineered to be resistant to that herbicide. So they spray a whole field of corn and all the weeds die, the corn doesn't. That's the most popular trait. The second trait which has been engineered is for a plant to emit its own pesticide. That is, every cell in the plant emits a small amount of a toxin which can kill a larval stage of a bug which bites into that plant. About 99% of all engineered crops are either engineered for herbicide resistance or for this pesticide production. There's no value to consumers in either one of those. There's no enhanced nutrition, there's no better flavor, there's no cheaper product. So from the consumer's point of view, there's no reason to care about GMOs, no reason to purchase one. We think from an organic farming point of view as well, when these plants produce pollen, that pollen can spread to other plants. So if we're trying to raise organic corn here, and somebody in the next field is raising GMO corn, their pollen is going to blow over here, it's going to contaminate our corn, and we're not going to be able to have organic corn. We think that not only is it unsafe, there are a number of studies now beginning to show that these things are having deleterious effects on people's health when they eat them. A lot of rat studies, livestock studies show rejection by animals, disease problems with scarring of internal organs. So there's enough reason for us to feel that we don't want to feed them to our kids, and we think that the government should regulate them and test them. It doesn't do that right now. There's no testing by the government of these. The government has simply agreed to accept the results of the companies that produce these, and there's no independent testing. Farmers are already finding that, for instance, in herbicide resistance, a lot of weeds have become tolerant of Roundup, this weed killer. So now the technology is not working for them. They either have to go back to doing things like cultivation in their fields, or they have to go to a more advanced herbicide. And now other companies are developing 2,4-D as a new herbicide for which they're engineering resistance into plants. That's even more dangerous and toxic than Roundup, we think. That was part of Agent Orange in Vietnam, if people remember that era. Most of the rest of the world has rejected it. They don't think it's been proven safe. They don't think there's any value to it. But in America and Canada and Argentina and Brazil primarily, it has been accepted in a large way. In the last 2 years, consumers have become much more conscious of this, and there's begun to be a movement to reject GMOs. So we think pretty soon there's going to be a significant number of states that have required the labeling of this food, and that is going to show that people do not want to have this food. Once it's labeled, then they know what it is and they won't buy it. And I think that's why the companies are fighting so desperately to prevent labeling, because they don't want consumers to know what's there. So we think, this technology ultimately has to be stopped. We think it's going to be stopped, and we're proud to be part of that movement and doing what we can to do so.